Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another Matt Talk. This week, I wanted to talk about scalability of our platform and security, which is one of those really complex topics that I can't talk well about, but Ryan can. And that's why I said, Ryan, you come and talk to hoteliers in simple language about the really complex things that you do in our business. But Ryan, who are you and like what's your title and how did you end up at Mews?
I'll do my best. Yeah. Thank you for having me. So, yeah, my name is Ryan Tomlinson. I'm the VP of Platform Enablement. And there's quite a few responsibilities that I look after. One is our infrastructure, so our cloud infrastructure, everything that essentially underpins our products, keeps them up, stable, reliable for our customers, but also security. So making sure that we have a very high security posture, both internally and for our customers. And then everything around data and what we call developer experience, which we can get into later if useful. But we have over 100 people in platform enablement today.
And when you were a young boy, was this the aspiration always to do this special role that you do?
I was always torn. So actually what I wanted to do was be like a PE teacher. I'm quite into sport and I think running, as you know. So I always like younger days wanted to be a PE teacher. It wasn't until later that I kind of got into computing and yeah, things like that. So it was a
What was the
later decision.
first thing you built yourself on a computer?
Oh, that's a very good question. I used to build websites for people. So like very early, very young, I can't even remember the age, maybe teens. But I remember like building websites for people just because I found it fun. Like the instant gratification of being able to build something yourself and
Yeah.
kind of see it out there, which is kind
Do
of lost
you
a little bit
do
now.
you
But
think about AI now where you don't even need to have coding skills to even build a website? And what how is that going to transform the space that you're operating in?
that's the thing that I think excites me the most. Like what you can do today with tools like Lovable, and even Cursor and things like that. Like you can build stuff without knowing how to code. It's
Yeah.
going to be interesting to see how it changes the industry. There's, of course, a lot of rhetoric around, will we need software engineers anymore?
Yeah.
Which I think we will. I think the role will just change slightly, just to
You
make
become
sure.
more powerful almost.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So I think like ultimately I see it that everyone will be able to create products, like even yourself, Matt. Like if you want to have an idea, you're no longer trying to articulate that to somebody else, what's in your
Yeah.
mind. You can build it, and then a software engineer might do the last mile and get it into production. But it's exciting.
Nice. So what does your team do to make sure that Muse is available like 24/7 around the clock, around the world all the time? Like how do they go about that job?
There's quite a few areas, there's quite a few things that we do. Like we are constantly iterating and trying to improve on our infrastructure. Firstly, everything's in Microsoft Azure. So Microsoft's a cloud. And we're in multiple what they call availability zones, but you should just kind of think of those as like data centers. Right. So at once we're in multiple data centers, which means if one goes down, which they can, we just switch straight across automatically to the other one. So we're constantly thinking defensively about these scenarios that could occur and how would we respond. We even do drills. I don't know if you know that, Matt, but like we actually do incident drills where we say, right, if this happens, how would we respond? The team will kind of rally and we essentially kind of practice our response.
Nice. Do you use, like I've heard of companies that use external hackers to try and constantly hack the infrastructure, but you pay them, like these are friendly hackers instead of the unfriendly
Yes.
ones?
Yes, we do a couple of things. So we do internal kind of resilience, kind of checking our systems. But yes, we have a bug bounty program, which is kind of what you're describing, where we pay hackers to find uh, uh, breaches in the system, potentially, or vulnerabilities, sorry. And we'll pay them dependent on the severity. So we actually use a third party called HackerOne, and they're like an intermediary. And if a hacker finds something, depending on that severity, we pay them a different amount.
Nice.
Yeah.
So often I see these emails come in from other platforms, and we're cloud native, but they're also coming from cloud native platforms where they say we have a planned downtime on Sunday between 5 and 9. And I'm like, what? They're going to just take their whole platform offline? And I just don't understand why this happens, but maybe you can give some light to why this actually happens for even for cloud systems still.
I mean, the reality is there should be no excuse for that these days. Like there are perhaps some edge cases, but if you build a system that's resilient and built for migrations, like whatever it might be, you might be moving on to a new database or a new technology. A lot of these companies have got them into a situation where there's so much complexity where they can't do it seamlessly. But you have to build defensively. You have to build your architecture and your infrastructure thinking in the future, we may want to change this technology or this database. How do we build this in a way that we can do it without impacting customers? So everything we do, we never want to have any downtime. We actually deploy, I don't know if you know this as well, Matt, we deploy twice a day at the minute, sometimes more. So we're constantly shipping features and new changes to customers and fixes, and nobody notices it. We
It's really good.
actually late last year changed a whole region. So we moved our hosting from the Netherlands
I
to
remember this.
Germany.
Yeah.
Zero downtime. So we literally no customers were affected at all, and we changed entire countries where our primary hosting was.
Like in the early days of Mews, we would have a deployment day once per week or once per 2 weeks where we'd say, okay, right, on a Tuesday, because we could never deploy on a Friday because then, we'd have to bug fix over the weekend. So we'd have like a Thursday or a Tuesday release day and we pack up all of these features until that day and then we would release them and then we'd spend the next day trying to fix all the bugs that we just released into the environment. Like we've matured so much since then. But like, do we release multiple things at the same time, or as and when features come in, we just deploy them, or like, what's the process to make sure that we don't deploy badly built features?
Ultimately, it's all about reducing risk and confidence. So we write automated tests. Every feature should have a bunch of tests to check that it actually functions correctly before it actually goes out into a customer. So we have different environments that we test in before it goes to production. We try and release as much as possible. And this is what's kind of almost counterintuitive, where people think, oh, you shouldn't be doing this many changes. Like we aim to do 50 plus changes to production because the more that you push smaller changes, the less of an impact it's going to have because you can narrow it down to say, right, just this one little thing went out. If there's an
Yeah.
issue, we know it's this one little thing. If you have, and we have 300 engineers, I think, building product today, all working on the same code. So if you batch all of that up, then they have a potential to have a kind of bigger impact or more catastrophic impact if something goes wrong. So our goal is to release even more and
I
faster.
love it. So I've come out of a space in hotels where we used to have a server in the back room, and we'd have an IT team that would just take care of this server, and the systems was always pretty fast. We're now in the cloud, so there's a change in obviously having IT teams on site because you don't necessarily need them for at least not for our product. But it also means that we have to design products in a different way in the cloud. How do you? And a lot of hoteliers are still like, I like knowing where my server is. I like that I can lock that door. How do you think about security and like stability of platforms by having a server in your back office?
Again, it's about the risk of that. Like if something goes wrong with that server, which it will, right? Like that's computers, they're complex things, they'll go down. There's no redundancy, right? There's no redundancy outside of that. If you have a power cut or something kind of goes down, so you're really increasing the risk of your business by being located on premise. I remember back in this is like 15 years ago, I worked for a tech company. I used to have to drive down to a data center with a USB stick, and I would plug it in to actually deploy the code and make the changes. Or if we couldn't scale, I'd have to buy a new server, literally drive down for 3 hours, plug it in, and that's how we scaled. Any issues, again, you had to kind of fix it. The cloud really is just geographic compute. You have like servers across the world that within seconds you can pick from. We even have what's called auto scaling. So what you can say is, if we see this much demand, just add more servers. You don't even have to touch it. It just add more servers automatically. You don't get any of that if you're on premise. Like you're really increasing the risk to your business and there's really no reason for it these days.
Because we today have what 12,000 customers live on the platforms across different servers. We work with Amazon, we work with Microsoft. Does this scale infinitely, or do you at some point have to rebuild everything from the ground up?
No, I think so. You build to this to the predicted demand, right? You don't kind of over optimize. So whether we double, treble that, it's all possible, right? Like we can infinitely scale, but there are things that we have to do to ensure that that is possible. And there's multiple techniques for scaling. There's like things called like sharding and things like that, but there's multiple ways that you can actually scale. But we work kind of proactively to predict the demand. So if we're going to add X thousand new properties, we know about it well ahead of time and make sure that there's the headroom in the space that we can actually scale to meet that demand. But it's a constant focus, right, of the team. It's a constant investment. But essentially, we can infinitely scale the system.
Nice. And when something goes wrong, like and things will go wrong, like it just happens. At some point, something is going to go wrong with one of the partners that we work with. I'm assuming you have all kinds of reports. Like, I'm imagining you at your house with a giant screen with all kinds of reports, but I don't know if that's what your house looks like. But how do you go about figuring out what's gone wrong and how do you solve for that?
Well, essentially every team has that. So you're imagining, right, like the big screen with all the graphs and the dashboards on it. Every team at Mews has that because they need to understand, are they scaling appropriately? Is the performance okay? So we are constantly, it's called observability. So anything that moves in our system, anybody clicks a button, anybody checks a customer in or out or does a report, we log absolutely everything. That all goes into what we call observability, and we can create dashboards of it. But we're talking literally terabytes a month, which is like huge and huge amounts of data because if it moves, we want to log it and get the insight of it.
Because how do we know that you're doing a good job and that your teams are doing a good job? Because obviously, if the system is up and running, it's like that we're like, great, everything is fine. But like, like usually we know that you're doing a good job when something goes wrong. But I actually want to know in advance whether the platform team is doing great work. So how do we know whether your team is doing amazing work?
We track like metrics. We have like a scorecard of the metrics that we have. So in terms of performance, we have a set of like service level objectives that we expect. So for example, 99.9% is our uptime service level agreement with our
And I want to pause there before you continue this. 99.9% uptime. Most hotels have a night audit, which means your system goes down for, half an hour every single day. Like 99.9 uptime means there is no night audit. It never goes down. Like you can always check customers in. It is like mind-boggling that there's still hotels around the world that have a thing called the night audit, where you take the whole system offline to figure out how to move to the next day. So I just wanted to pause there before you jump back in there.
yeah, and even though that's our SLA, like I will of course striving for 100%. Anything below that is like a disappointment to us. So we're constantly measuring the performance of the site, um, how much headroom we've got, as I said before, how the uptime. So we're constantly measuring and scrutinizing these metrics literally on a daily basis.
So would you say, so Mews, we've come up through small independent hotels and then slowly moved up to larger hotels. Would you say Mews is enterprise ready? And what does that mean to you?
I think like enterprise ready is a funny one, this one, because it's like I have a high bar and we all do at Muse. So that we have the same expectations for all of our customers, regardless of whether you're a kind of small independent or you're a large enterprise chain. So really for me, it's about stability, scalability, compliance, but that bar should apply to absolutely everybody. Um, but of course, we do, right? We already operate with large chains. We already support some big chains. We couldn't do that unless we had the level of diligence and stability in our platform. But really, that kind of applies across the board to all of our customers, large or small.
So if there's someone listening right now that like managing the IT infrastructure for a large chain, do we publish this information? Do they need to come to us to find the documentation that we have, or like how do they figure out what our infrastructure is and how it works?
That's one of the things that actually attracted to me to Muse is like the openness of what we do. So we actually have platform documentation, which is completely open to anybody. You can go onto the site. I don't know if you'll have show notes, but we can maybe put it in there.
Mews.com. Click above, click down, down below.
Wherever it is.
Like and
But yeah, like
subscribe.
it's all completely open. So you can look at how we scale, how our database is available, what technologies we use, what languages that we use. All of this is completely open. We try and be as open and transparent as possible. We write a ton of blog posts as well. So we actually have like a tech blog where you can go and read about our practices, how we scale, how software is developed at Mews. So we try and be as kind of open as possible. But yeah, all of that is essentially kind of open for everybody. I think like maybe the question is like, what would the expectations be for enterprise ready? What are the expectations of enterprise customers? We touched on uptime, right? Of course, everybody's interested in uptime, but you often see things like SSO for login.
Yeah.
So single sign-in, role-based access, audit logging, robust APIs, all of these things are things you often associate with kind of enterprise grade. And we provide all of those things, right? I actually think we go beyond it. So, recently we launched passkeys, right, as a way to authenticate and to log in. This is like the future of how you log in. It's a very, very secure way to do that. Very few companies are actually doing that. So I think we're even surpassing some of the enterprise companies. I know Matt, that I worked at Salesforce before that. And even some of the practices that we do at Mews are well beyond some of those kind of enterprise software companies. And we just continue to kind of push the bar on them. We can continue to launch new features that I think do sit in that kind of enterprise ready class.
Because what's shifted last year? Last year, something happened across hospitality that really shifted our focus towards really doubling down on security and talking about it publicly and developing features. But what happened last year?
We've seen a huge vector of attack across the industry, right? So we've seen these hackers try and get into systems across the whole of the hospitality industry. And the reason that we know that it's across the industry is because Mews is a part of the retail and hospitality cybersecurity forum. And that's a group of companies that come together to essentially share their experiences, what they're seeing, and it's a common pattern. The main thing we're really seeing is phishing, right? And so that's where these attackers, are trying to convince people to give them their credentials. Um, and the way that they're doing that, I think, is quite interesting. You posted something on LinkedIn recently around this. What they're doing is they buy ads on Google so that if you're one of our customers, they'll go to Google, they'll type Mews login, and the top result is a sponsored ad. It looks completely legit, but it's not, right? Essentially, what the hackers have done is paid money to Google to get to the very top. Then when you click through to that site, it looks like Mews, right? It looks like our login page. And so what we're seeing is our customers are being tricked. They enter their username and login, but the site's not mews.com. It looks like it is, but it's like mewas.com or something similar. And at that point, they've given their credentials over, right? So they give their credentials inadvertently to the attackers. The attackers can then get into Mews using those credentials, and then they'll scrape their data or reservations or things like that. But again, this is across the board. We've had over 400 fake domains. So fake.
But don't we have two-factor authentication deployed to all our customers? How are they still like getting in, even if we have two-factor deployed?
It's a constant game of cat and mouse in cybersecurity. Like you make one move, they make another. Like they are dedicated and they are heavily backed financially. A lot of these are kind of state-sponsored attacks. So in two-factor, yeah, you're right. You think, well, you've got two-factor. How could you do that? Well, they just pivot. So when they ask for your username and password, and essentially what they do is they take your credentials, send it to Mews, which triggers us sending you a code to your email or your device or whatever. And then they have a second page which says, now give me the code. And just like that, the person still thinks they're on the site. They enter the code, and then the attacker puts the code in. So they're even trying to get around kind of two-factor, which comes back to the point on passkeys. With passkeys, that doesn't work.
Can you explain what a passkey is? Because I think a lot of people, I heard it the first time. It's like, ah, sure, I have to probably buy some device, I have to plug into my laptop, because I thought it was one of those like hardware devices I had to purchase, and I was like, I'm never going to do that. But
Yeah.
actually, passkey isn't that.
No, that's right. So passkeys, like you think of it like your mobile phone, right? So when you often you don't log in typically now to your mobile phone. You use your Face ID or a fingerprint. So it's exactly that. Like you can use your trusted device to authenticate, and you can use any. You can actually buy one of those keys, like a security key or whatever it might be. Or you can just use your mobile phone to actually authenticate. So it's much more secure because I've literally got my phone to authenticate. It's a one-time setup. It's super, super quick. It's so easy to set up within Mews. And from then on, you can just use like a password manager or a device, and it's so frictionless. So it's not only
Nice.
frictionless, but it's like very, very secure to do. I
So
actually
what's
got a
better, like passkey or single sign-on?
both both of they're equally. So we have had zero users phished who use SSO. So it's both are great options.
But I would imagine if you're a smaller independent hotel, you're probably not going to have an entire infrastructure to set up single sign-on and manage all of your systems. So if I think a small hotel would probably go for passkey, whereas a mid-market like a hotel group, they would possibly have single sign-on. What would you say to come? Because there are still a lot of hotel groups that work with Mews that do not have single sign-on set up. So how would you convince them that that is the right way forward?
I think
What's your
like the
sales
fact,
pitch?
yeah, no, like I think the fact that we've seen zero account takeovers at all using SSO, it is such a secure way to do it, and it's simple to set up. It's so easy to set up. It's a one-time setup, and then from then on, you don't have to worry about it. You're using a single set of credentials that your team already use. It's frictionless, much
And I
like
think the thing that I love the most about it, and we use it at Muse for our systems as well, that when an employee leaves, and in hotels we've got quite a lot of turnover, you don't have to log into every system to remove that user one by one because you will forget one day, and then that means that that user has access to it. But with single sign-on, you remove them from the single sign-on kind of infrastructure, and it gets removed from all of the systems simultaneously. And because of the high turnover in hotels, I would strongly recommend anyone who's considering it to prioritize this over anything else to do today.
100%. That's a good point. Yeah, I think like it's centrally managed. So if somebody offboards or leaves, you don't have to remember, oh, now I need to go into Muse and remove them from
Yeah.
that account. They're already offboarded once.
So what are you investing in the next 12 months?
A lot.
You keep
we have
asking for money.
we have yeah, we have we actually have a 2027 plan. So we've got like a 2-year vision for where we want to be. And there's a huge amount that we're investing in. As I said, like we're constantly focused on performance. We actually think that there's a huge amount of improvements we can make on the performance of the product, which will dramatically improve the user experience. So if you think about like checking in, which front of house will do every day, those types of things need to be super, super rapid. So we're investing heavily in reducing those times to improve that user experience. So that's a massive one. Another one that we're looking at is central identity. So as Muse has increased its ecosystem, we have RMS now, we have events management system. We are broadening the ecosystem. We want to have a single login for that. So once you're in Muse, you're into the entire ecosystem. That's something that we're probably looking at late this year, early next year.
But it
Um,
sounds easy, but it's like, I'm like, great, just use the
yeah.
same login for everything. But actually, there's a lot of complexity behind the scenes to get that deployed, I'm assuming.
Exactly. You need like an identity provider, and there is quite a bit of complexity in there to make sure that it's kind of consistent. But again, similar to the SSO thing, it also means you're managing just one account, so it should like be more frictionless for customers and improve their experience of just managing one account versus one for each of the kind of products in the ecosystem.
Nice.
We're investing massively still, of course, in security. So we actually have like a quite a large security team today, and they do both the preventative things. So, for example, every line of code that a developer writes at Muse is security scanned. Like literally nothing gets to production unless it's security scanned for potential vulnerabilities. But they also do things like remediation, right? So not just the prevention, but if something happens, how do they respond to that security incident? We're actually splitting those functions out. So we're going to have separate and dedicated teams for kind of prevention and remediation. So massive, massive investment in security. And more broadly, we're hugely investing in the infrastructure. Today, we have like a large monolithic system. Again, we deploy it twice a day. We are now building out, we're breaking the system down into much smaller parts. So each team can build and run their systems like and deploy multiple times a day. We will get to the point where we are releasing hundreds of times a day. Today we're at 2. So there's a heavy investment in that.
Nice. My last question. If anyone's been listening this far to our conversation, what's the one thing you want hoteliers to walk away with that makes them sleep better at night?
I mean, I think the fact is that we have over 100 people just looking at this, right? Like this is not like a 3 or 4 person team. We have over 100 people in platform, and every line of code that we ship, it has the guest in mind, right? Like we obsess over reliability, security, performance. It's a thing that's never done, right? We constantly obsess about kind of improving. So whether that's like check-in, payments, reports, like the entire platform team are working 24/7 to make sure that everything kind of runs smoothly. And I don't think people often see that. They just think, oh, there'll be a couple of people running the system,
Yeah.
but there aren't. There
On these bicycles, keeping the system like
exactly,
electricity
exactly.
going.
But we are constantly not only investing in kind of keeping it up, but we have multiple teams like driving the future. And the next 12 months are going to be super exciting. I think you're going to see a massive change in the performance of the product, stability, and everything is just exponential, I think, in the next 12 months.
Nice. Thank you so much for joining me today. Like it's a topic that is really hard, but I think you made it digestible. And I'm hoping that that's the response we'll get from hoteliers. But I really appreciate you showing up. And I know that it's not always the most comfortable thing for someone from the development team to step into the limelight and to talk about these really complex things. But for me, it made sense.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.